Death is interesting. If it wasn't interesting, millions of people wouldn't do it every year. Thank you. Don't worry, I'll be here for the next at least 10 minutes. But the truth of the matter is, death is always covered in the media. Because of this, other interesting incidents tend to get pushed aside more often than not. And of course, these things are going to be the things we cover in today's video. Starting with the Dreams on Parade moving on at Tokyo Disneyland. This parade was basically a send-off parade for the original, called Disney Dreams On Parade. Basically the same exact name, just without the moving on part. But we're not here to talk about some lame parade that's already gone. What was the incident? Well, one of the parade floats broke. And by broke, I mean it collapsed and almost fell on a couple guests. You know, just your average everyday parade show. Now this incident happened with the Buzz Lightyear float. Now Buzz Lightyear float has these planets on this long elongated pole, and it moves sometimes, and apparently something happened and the structure failed. And when it failed, it kind of fell on the ground, just bam, right in front of all the guests. Now take in mind that it just missed the guests by feet, and this pole wasn't like, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, it was 330 pounds. If it landed on someone, it would have instantly killed them. So yeah, this wasn't some sort of like fun little accident. This was basically the plotline for Final Destination 6. Now for this particular instance, this incident wasn't really interesting because of the collapse. Actually, what I'm saying, that's pretty damn interesting. Why did it collapse in the first place? No one knows. But I think personally, this is interesting because of where it happened. You see, Tokyo Disneyland is located in Japan, which is thought to be one of the most safest places in the world. Heck, they have a train called the Shinkansen, which is essentially a bullet train, that has been opened for almost 60 years at this point and has yet to have a single freaking fatality. That means no one has died on that system yet. That is insane. But coming back to Tokyo Disneyland is known to be by far the safest Disneyland of any Disney park. To give you some perspective, Tokyo Disneyland has only had one single injury ever since its opening in April 15th, 1983. The injury happened on Raging Spirits, which is in Tokyo Disney Sea. That is insane. You will not see that in any Disney park, except if it's really new. But regardless, there's more interesting stuff ahead, so let's move on to number 4, which is the People Mover in Disneyland Resort, California. Now this next incident is pretty interesting, because unlike the other unfortunate incidents of the People Mover, this incident has a girl quite literally falling off the People Mover. Actually, no, let me rephrase that. She quite literally launched herself off the People Mover. I know you want to hear it, so let me explain. Back in 1972, there were 4 teenage girls riding the People Mover, and unfortunately, one of them dropped the Mickey ears on the track. So what did they do? 2 of the girls jumped off the People Mover, onto the track by the way, and then went to grab the Mickey ears. Now of course the People Mover moves pretty darn fast, so what they did was they decided to jump on a different People Mover. Now the first girl was fortunate enough to get on a close by People Mover, however the second girl wasn't as lucky. She couldn't find any nearby People Movers, but saw one going through a tunnel. Now being very big brain she of course ran at the People Mover at full speed. Now what she didn't know was that at the end of the tunnel, the People Mover track took a fairly sharp curve over a ledge that was essentially 30 feet high. And unfortunately, when you're running out of a tunnel and running at full speed, you really don't have time to react. So essentially what happened was she came out of the tunnel at sprinting speeds, not being able to stop, and launching herself down 30 feet onto the hard pavement. Ouch. And of course she survived. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part wasn't the fact that, she survived. It was the fact that she tried to sue Disney for not putting an exit sign in the tunnel that she ran through, which she should have been in the first place. Like, this is comparable to running into a Target, into an employee area, then tripping over employee equipment, then turning around and suing Target for not putting up a sign saying, "Beware of employee equipment." I don't understand, it's so stupid, it's hilarious. Now I do want to say that this information comes from cast member stories, it isn't like anything official in the newspapers. Everything else I'm going to bring to you today, basically comes from a news source or a website. This comes from customer testimonials, so I don't know if it's true. There's no newspapers on it, no articles on it. It's just people retelling the same story. So it might be fake, but regardless, it still is pretty interesting. Well, anyways, let's move on to number 3, which is Disneyland Paris's Thunder Mountain. Now, this incident happened back on April 25th, 2011. This was during a time when Disneyland Paris was going through some pretty bad financial troubles. These financial problems led to a lot of issues throughout the park, like quality issues, staffing issues, and losing entire boat issues, but mainly it resulted in very bad maintenance issues. And I mean really bad maintenance issues. So bad, in fact, that it put a 38-year-old man into the hospital. So what exactly happened? Well, back in 2011, Thunder Mountain didn't have the glorious explosion scene it has today. Back then, it instead had a very practical effecty, that's not even a word, an earthquake scene. Now, this scene had the trains kind of rock back and forth and had shaking lanterns, as well as these giant rocks closer to the top of the ceiling that shook. Now, the idea was to create this fake illusion that the rocks were shaking and almost about to fall on top of the train. However, due to very poor maintenance, that's kinda what happened. Now, these rocks, of course, were made out of fiberglass, so they were overall very light. Unfortunately, the rock that fell was about the size of a person, about 7 feet across. Anything 7 feet across will hurt, especially if it donks you on the head from like 10 feet up. And that's basically what happened to the guy. Yikes. Unfortunately, this made Disney pretty paranoid. So instead of, trying to fix the problem, they went through and disabled all the shaking rock effects in Disneyland Paris's Thunder Mountain. However, it didn't just stop there. Disney was so freaking paranoid, they went through and looked at every single one of the Thunder Mountains throughout the world, and they were like, yeah, this is too dangerous, we don't want to spend the money to change it. So Disney went to all of their Thunder Mountains and just one by one started disabling all the rock effects. This included Disneyland California's, Tokyo Disneyland, and also, unfortunately, Disney World's. Very interesting. They also had this additional effect on Tokyo Disneyland's Big Thunder Mountain, where these two rocks and sticks would basically come down and try to simulate the cave collapsing in. And yeah, even though they weren't really that convincing, they were ultimately removed in the end too. Now, I don't really know why, since they use completely different mechanisms than the other shaking rocks, but I guess it still is interesting. And that brings us to our second interesting incident. Now, unlike the other incidents before this incident is kinda unique. And by unique, I mean this is some of the many incidents at Disney parks reported by Disney. Now, of course, since it's reported by Disney, the reports tend to be a little more on the vague side, and are usually stuff like leg injuries, hospitalization due to motion sickness, and whatnot. However, there is one incident that was very different from the others, so much so that I thought it was literally an April's Fool's joke until I realized that a bunch of other news sites covered the same exact information. And that one specific incident was, drum roll please. Woman experiences sudden memory loss on Castaway Creek Lazy River. Now, as stupid as this sounds, sudden memory loss can be linked to many things. Things like depression, amnesia, and according to WebMD, cancer. Of course it says that. Why am I not surprised? Now, outside of being hospitalized for over 24 hours, we don't really know much more on what happened to this lady. Now, if you're wondering why this isn't really that interesting, especially compared to the other facts before, the truth is, it's not really supposed to be. I just thought it was incredibly funny how they named it and just kind of dropped it into the list of incidents. Like, instead of saying, oh, woman suffers from acute memory loss at Disney World, they instead had to specifically say exactly where she lost her memory, as if the lazy river stole her memory or something. Anyways, regardless, let's move on to number 1, which is by far the most interesting incident at Disneyland to date, because this is a story on how an 8-year-old girl got shot in the back on the Disneyland Railroad. So back in February of 1990, Nayeli Diana Placentia was riding in a train around the Disneyland Railroad. Now, the train was about to approach the Videopolis area of the park, or otherwise known as Toontown Station today. However, as the train was rounding the corner, the little girl turned to her parents and said, "Hey, my back kind of hurts a little bit, I don't know why." And the parents did what any reasonable parent would do and took her to the hospital. Now, when they got to the hospital, it was then realized that the little girl had literally been hit in the back by a bullet. By this point, a small-scale investigation concluded that someone had fired up a shot in the air, and it just so happened to impale itself into the girl's back. Now, using the impact wound as guidance, investigators were able to conclude that the bullet came from the northwest area of Disneyland, but unfortunately, due to the highly populated area, they weren't exactly able to find the actual shooter. I can't decide what's more crazy, the fact that a random bullet fired into the air just happened to line itself up perfectly to hit a little girl on the back on a moving train, or the fact that the girl, apparently, didn't even cry when she got hit. She just straight up turned to her parents and was like, "Yeah guys, my back kind of hurts, let's just leave the park." Wow. And at this point, we are well past our 10-minute mark. That means we're going to start wrapping up the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, guys. Making this video was incredibly fun. And as I was reading and researching all of this information, I found myself becoming very well interested in all these different incidents at Disney parks. And I really do hope that you are interested as well. Hopefully more interested than, death. So anyways, now I'm going to be like every single other YouTuber on the planet and dictate to you how you should spend the next 10 seconds of your life. And that's by commenting, sharing, and destroying that like button. Anyways, thanks again for watching. More videos coming soon. Most likely in time for New Year's. In 2030.